Luke chapter 10, if you got a Bible, Luke 10. I don't know about a song before the sermon that starts out, "Anywhere with Jesus I can go to sleep." Maybe not today. Sibling rivalries have shaped history. And we'll think about a few of them in just a few minutes, but some of them are good-natured. Some of them are just stories of competition between people who grew up in the same family. Sometimes it's a lot darker than that. It's sometimes a sibling rivalry in history is about betrayal. It's about bloodshed. It's about death. And we'll talk about some of those. For instance, the first people born onto this planet, Cain and Abel, have a bit of a sibling rivalry. It's pretty one-sided. Abel offers the better sacrifice, more pleasing to God. Cain gets upset, and he goes out and he kills his brother. That starts a trend, kind of a theme you'll see in Scripture of brothers and sometimes sisters who just don't get along very well at all. You don't have to go very far in the story of Genesis until you get to Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau are twin brothers. They just can't get along. It seems like it was going to be that way from the beginning. Even in utero, they were warring with one another. They were fighting with one another, and that continues on through most of the rest of their lives. Jacob has a son named Joseph, and he can't get along with his brothers. There's some, he feels like he's better than them, it seems, at times, and his brothers can't stand that. And so they have fights and fights and fights. This rattles on throughout most of history. There are a lot of times where brothers don't get along with brothers, sisters don't get along with sisters, in royalty, in common everyday folks like us. I was talking to Terry a few minutes ago before we started. I'm not going to share all the details, but he said, "Oh, sibling rivalry, huh? I'll tell you about a sibling rivalry. It's him and his brother, and if you got a free 20 minutes, that'd be a good story to hear, right?" And I was going to talk about my kids having a hard time deciding who plays the PlayStation. So sibling rivalries, from the beginning of history, common in our day. We got one in Luke chapter 10. So if you want to turn over and find Luke chapter 10, this is a rivalry between a couple of sisters. It's an interesting story. It's Mary and Martha. And I don't know how many times I've preached on this in the last 12 years here, but I feel like every time I've preached on this, somebody's come up to me afterwards and said, "You're too hard on Martha." Pam? I'm gonna try to do a little better for her today, for you, okay? So call me down if I don't, all right? maybe correct me when I'm wrong. All right. So Jesus rolls into town in Luke chapter 10. He has just sent off some missionaries on a journey, and he's told those missionaries, go into these towns and rely on the hospitality of the people that you meet there in these towns. Go out, spread the gospel, look for the people of peace, and if you find somebody, stay in their house. Don't go house to house, don't change houses. You find somebody who welcomes you and shows you hospitality, then stay with them. That's more on that later. But Jesus is traveling around. He's an itinerant preacher. He goes from place to place, and he preaches the gospel, spreads the kingdom of God, and he relies on people to provide for him in a lot of places, right? The Son of Man has no place to lay his head, he says. So he relies on people at times. Mary and Martha are a couple of those people. There are two sisters in this story. We've already read it. Sean read it for us a few minutes ago. We'll hit on some of those passages in a minute. But you got one sister who seems to be working. Her name's Martha. Can you hear the clanging pots and pans in the kitchen? And she's preparing for Jesus, Lord of the universe, to show up in her house. She's over there making supper and cleaning the place up and getting everything ready for Jesus. She's working. She got a sister named Mary, and Mary is not in the kitchen. She is not helping prepare, cleaning the place up. She is sitting down at the feet of Jesus. So you've got one, we read the story, and it seems like you've got one who's working and you got one who's listening. But before long, this great dinner that's supposed to be a blessing to all involved is a crisis. It's a crisis. I'm going to call it a crisis of attention. All right? Who are we paying attention to? Who has our focus? What has our focus in life? And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about what that means for us and maybe some distracting things that could take our focus away. Really, I'm going to hit on this. This is kind of the point. I want us to think about what and who we pay attention to most in our lives. Poet Mary Oliver said that our attention, what we give our attention to, is the beginning of devotion. Attention is the beginning of devotion. I think you know this. You may not use those words to say it, but maybe you will now. But what you seem to focus on in life, you tend to be drawn towards that. What you give your attention to seems to captivate us more and more. If it's comparing ourselves to somebody else, then we're drawn more to certain things in life. If we really care about a sports team, we give our attention to the Braves or the Cardinals or whatever it is, then we're drawn more and more to news about that team. And that happens in every area of our life. Attention is the beginning of devotion. What we give our attention to, we will be devoted to. We could even use stronger language. I think we could say what we give our most attention to, we will eventually worship. What we give our attention to shapes us. It shapes what we love. It shapes our hearts. It shapes our minds. And if that's true, then we live in a time where our attention is intentionally sought by all kinds of huge companies who spend billions of dollars to captivate our attention. This is a crisis where discipleship is at risk. Not because we don't care about Jesus. Nobody here today is here because you don't care about Jesus. I really believe that. And so it's about where are we maybe losing focus, too distracted to focus on him. All right, back to Luke chapter 10, verse 38. I just want to hit some key phrases here. One of them is the beginning. They went on their way in verse 38, and Jesus enters a village, and a woman named Martha. Martha's mentioned first, okay? Put that in a win column. Martha's mentioned first, not Mary, okay? Mary's going to be the one who seems to be applauded at the end of this, but Martha's name is mentioned first. Jesus and the disciples are on their way. They go to a village where a woman named Martha opens her home to him. This is beautiful. This is what it's supposed to look like. Jesus has said this in the very same chapter. I'm sending you out. Rely on the hospitality of the people. This is Martha opening her home to a guest named Jesus, and who knows how many of his followers. This is hospitality. In the Jewish world, hospitality is a sacred thing. All right, this is something beautiful. This is welcoming a guest, welcoming a neighbor into your house. Martha opens the door to her house and invites Jesus in. She prepares for this, and she plans for this, and she picks up for this, and she cleans the house for this, and she goes and buys the food for this at the market, and she lugs all that stuff home, and she starts making it in her kitchen. She's busy about all these things. She's the one who's opened her door, bought the stuff, prepared the meal. She's the one likely who's going to do all the serving at home. She's doing what just about any faithful person would do. Jesus probably didn't come alone, probably came with some folks with him, and she's got a lot of serving that she's going to need to be doing. And while Martha works, her sister Mary doesn't. She disappears, not to the kitchen, not to the storeroom or the pantry or anything like that. She's at the feet of Jesus. Now, we would look in on this scene, and we'd see Jesus, notable teacher of the day, sitting what we'd call in the living room, the open space where people would congregate in the house. And we see Jesus there, and Mary is sitting down at his feet, listening to what he's saying, listening to his teaching. And then we would see in the background, in the kitchen area where the servants typically work, we'd see Sister Martha in there clanging the pots and pans, getting the dishes going, fixing her attention on what needs to be prepared for that day. And so one looks like she's working, and one looks to be a little bit lazy maybe in our eyes. I'd like for you to wrestle with that tension a little bit. A little bit more tension in the first century world. To sit at the feet of a notable teacher, a rabbi, meant one thing. It meant that you were becoming a student. You were becoming a disciple of that notable teacher or that notable rabbi, a learner, a disciple. One thing that never happened, and I mean that quite literally, one thing that never happened up until this point was that a woman sat down at the feet of a notable teacher. There is not one existing Jewish source from before the time of Jesus where a woman sits down at the feet of a teacher and listens. This is crossing all kind of boundaries in the ancient world. These are unspoken rules of the house and the culture that Mary seems to be violating here. Women were not expected to do this kind of thing, much less encouraged to do this kind of thing. She's crossing some lines here into discipleship. And it's Martha who speaks up. Martha's got a problem. And we'd look at it, I think, and say, you're right, she does. She's in there working and sweating and clanging the pots and pans, and Mary's in here not doing much of anything except listening to her teacher, Jesus, talk. And so Mary comes in at some point and says, Lord, do you not care that I'm in here working hard, sweating over this hot stove? I'm preparing food for you. You do not care that my sister has left me to serve alone. You don't care that I'm in here doing all the work by myself. Tell her to help me. And I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like that's what we would probably do if we were Martha. Why is she in here not doing anything, and I'm in here doing all the work? I think it's hard to miss her tone. She seems aggravated, frustrated. She seems like she's got maybe overwhelmed and there's so much on her. Why doesn't my sister come help? I'm doing everything for you, Jesus. Why is my sister in here not doing anything? And Jesus speaks. And Jesus speaks not to condemn Mary. This is interesting. All right? This is unlikely. This is the unlikely part of the story here. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha. Anytime he uses somebody's name twice, pay attention. Martha, Martha, you. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, you've worked too hard on supper. Stop. He doesn't say that at all. He doesn't say, Martha, Martha, you've been doing too much stuff in the kitchen. You ought to take a break. He doesn't say that. He doesn't really talk about what she's doing, does he? He talks about what she's thinking. He doesn't talk about the actions of her life. He talks about the thoughts and the attitudes and the emotions. Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. You are anxious, you're worried, you're overwhelmed, you're distressed by all these things. But Mary's chosen the good portion. One thing is necessary. One thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that. Jesus does not scold Martha for working. Okay? He does not scold her for taking action to prepare the house, to clean it up, to prepare the meal, to serve the meal. That is not at all what Martha is doing. He says, Martha, you are troubled, you're anxious, you're worried, you're overwhelmed, distressed and distracted by all these things. Worried and distracted by all these things. That's the idea that I really want you. I'm trying to find a way to get you to wrestle with that today. Are we anxious and troubled and distracted by many things? The Greek word here has a sense of being pulled apart. You are pulled away. You are fragmented in your life, drawn in opposite directions. Martha, your heart, he says, seems to be a bit misguided. Your life, your hands are busy, and that is fine. That's okay. In fact, Jesus relies on busy hands and busy lives at times. But the heart is distracted. And Jesus sees that the real issue is not what she's doing in the kitchen or in the living room or anything like that. It's what she's not paying attention to in that moment. Attention is everything. We live in a culture, if we think about Martha being anxious, troubled, distracted by all these things, man, 2,000 years later, we live in a society and a culture that is an age of distraction. The average person in this room probably has a cell phone in your pocket right now. Did you know that the average person touches their phone. Actually, don't show it yet, Michael. How often would you think the average person touches their phone every day? No, I'm talking about time, like not time limit, but how many times do you touch your phone every day? All right, you got a number in your mind, I hope? Got a number in your mind? All right, what's that next slide, Michael? 2,600 times a day. Did you know that? 2,600 times a day, the average Western person touches their phone. Notifications, dings, headlines, ads, somebody posted and you got to go check it out. It's not that we have too little information. It's not just that we've got too much information. It's that we've lost the ability to give undivided attention to what really matters in our lives. 2,600 times a day. Some company, organization, whatever, is always spending tons of dollars to get your attention and to get my attention. It's intentional. And here's the danger. Attention is the beginning of devotion. What we give our attention to 2,600 times every day, what we give our attention to will shape us, will mold us, will form us into whatever it wants to form us into. What you pay attention to, you will eventually devote yourselves to. What we pay attention to, we will eventually begin to love more and more and more. We become what we think about and what we focus on. It changes who we are. 2,600 times a day. If you pay attention to comparing yourself and your life to somebody else's beautiful, perfect life that they show you on social media, you will absolutely feel like you never stack up. Did you know that? What you pay attention to, you will devote yourself to, and you will feel like you never stack up. Well, it's not all comparison. There are a lot of things on our devices, and I say devices because I want to include our phones, our tablets, our TVs, our computers, whatever, wherever you get your media. If you pay attention to things all day, every day that will outrage you, that are intentionally engineered to bring about your rage and your hate towards other people and other things, if you pay attention to outrage, you will continually live in fear and anger. Do you notice that about yourself? Probably not, because we got blind spots. But do other people tell you sometimes that it seems like you're paying attention to a lot of things that provoke fear and anger in you? What you pay attention to, you will devote yourself to. Attention is the beginning of devotion. If you pay attention to consumer culture, then you will never feel like you have enough, because somebody's always got a little bit more, and somebody's always got something a little bit newer that you've got to pay attention to. And if we're paying attention to the wrong things, then it's hard for us to pay attention to the right things. If you pay attention to yourself, then you will always feel empty. If you pay attention to just what makes you happy and you always seek for happiness, then you'll never, ever find it. But if you learn to focus on Jesus, if you can avoid all the distractions and cut through all the clutter and pay attention to the things and the people that really matter in life, then your devotion to and your love for good things will grow. Okay, I don't want us to miss how radical and unlikely this story is. All right, we're going to come back to Luke chapter 10, so just a few minutes, we'll be back here. But go find John chapter 11 and John chapter 12 real quick. I'm not really trying to celebrate too much Martha or Mary, or to really come down on Martha or Mary that much. Both have great qualities. Let's not miss how radical Mary's act is. I already hit on this a little bit, but this is a culture in which women were not expected to study and learn, and Mary places herself squarely in the role of a disciple in Luke chapter 10. She takes her place at the feet of Jesus. She is actively, not passively, listening and learning and trying to grow. And if we follow her story, she doesn't spend all of her days just sitting at the feet of Jesus. In John chapter 11, she's grieving her brother, and she's wondering at times, where in the world was Jesus? In the very next chapter, in John chapter 12, it's Mary who anoints him for burial, a prophetic act where she shows incredible devotion that even the disciples don't understand yet. And they say, well, what is she doing? We could have sold that perfume, and we could have provided money for the poor for all that stuff. But Mary has taken a decisive action. Sometimes we say Mary's choosing the quiet life, but I don't think she is. She is in Luke chapter 10 for sure, but that's not all she ever does. Jesus doesn't say, Martha, Martha, you were distracted and worried about many things, but Mary has chosen the quiet life, and that's a beautiful thing. He says that Mary has chosen the good portion, the good part that cannot be taken away. Mary's chosen to do something on that day that will shape everything else that she will do. Let's not look at Mary and say the way to be a Christian disciple is to sit there and learn all the time and you don't have to do anything. That's not it. That's not what Jesus celebrates. That's not what Jesus prioritizes through the rest of his life and his ministry, but it is part of being a disciple. Because what we give our attention to shapes what we believe and shapes what we think and shapes what we love. And what we believe and think and love will shape what we do. It'll decide if we do good things or bad things. That's what it does. What about Martha? I mean, somebody's got to do the stuff, right? Somebody's got to do the jobs that need to get done. Somebody's got to take the action. Luke, I think, is doing something masterful here. I want you to go back to Luke chapter 10 and not so much look at our story, but I want you to look at the stories that surround ours. Before this, Jesus has sent his disciples out to spread the message of the kingdom of God. It's come near and people need to hear about it. And he tells those messengers to go depend on the hospitality of the people that they encounter. In other words, go into these villages and let those people take care of you. Let them do for you what Martha is doing in Luke chapter 10. Let them take care of you. And right before this scene of Mary and Martha is probably the most well-known story in the entire life of Jesus, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the moral of the story is not, now sit and listen and learn. The parable of the Good Samaritan ends with a call to go and do likewise. You see how this Samaritan has taken action, has provided for this man who's been left for dead on the side of the road. Go do likewise. You see somebody that's hurt and in need of help, then provide what they need. Go and do likewise. And so that's before this story. If you look at the very first story in Luke chapter 11, right after this one, Jesus is not going and doing. Luke chapter 11 opens with Jesus being withdrawn. He's gone to a certain place, and all he's doing over in that certain place is praying. And the disciples hear it, and that's when they say, Lord, teach us to pray like that. Teach us to pray. And in between the sending out of the messengers with a call to go depend on people, let them take care of you, and the go and do likewise of the Good Samaritan, in between that beginning and the withdrawn prayer trust part in Luke chapter 11, right in the middle is a house. And in that house, you've got both sides of this story. In that house, you find a woman at the feet of Jesus. She's attentive, she's dependent, she's trusting. And in that house, you find another woman in the kitchen, providing hospitality and taking care of the needs of Jesus. And you find a word from Jesus in that house, and it's difficult. One thing is necessary. And the hard part for us, I think, is finding out what that one thing is today. Because if you read before this story, the one thing necessary was go do likewise. Go and do likewise. And if you read after this story, the one thing necessary is, Lord, we want to sit at your feet and teach us to pray. And in the middle, you've got both. This is Luke's vision of discipleship. There's compassionate action of the Good Samaritan, and there's centered attention of Mary. That's a disciple in Luke's words. And the question is this, I think. This is where it all kind of comes together. Can we discern which moment we are in? Can we look at our lives? And look, this answer, I don't think that it's possible for anybody to stand up here and say, today, you all need to be in the moment of paying attention to what Jesus says and don't do anything about it. Just listen and learn. I can't tell you that that's where you are right now. I also can't tell you, you need to stop listening and learning and you need to get up and go do something. Go do some compassionate stuff. Can we discern which moment we are in? Which one does today call for you? Because the church and the Christian that doesn't know when to stop and listen will spend most of its existence being noisy, anxious, and reactive to whatever the world throws at it. That's not what Jesus wants. And the church that only sits and learns without ever doing anything, without ever going and doing likewise, will not do much of anything to bring the kingdom of God into this world. And so the call is for both. The church or the Christian that sits at the feet of Jesus is really the one that is equipped to rise up and go and do likewise. The one that sits at the feet of Jesus is the one who's grounded in love and led by wisdom and fueled by grace. It will, like Mary, love God, and as we see in Martha, love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We see both inside this one house in Luke chapter 10. In other words, attention leads to devotion, and devotion then leads to action. So Jesus does not say that Martha is wrong to provide hospitality. He does not say that serving is wrong. He does not say that working, that doing good deeds is wrong. What he says about Martha is, Martha, you are missing the moment here. Maybe you've not discerned what is most needed right now. And that moment might not come again for these two sisters. Jesus is not long for this world in Luke chapter 10. She's missed the moment. And so please do not hear this story in Luke chapter 10 this morning as a story about choosing between an active life and a prayerful life, between an active life and a quiet life. Don't hear this as you have to pick between serving and a life of contemplation. That's not what this is. This is about recentering our attention on what really matters for today. And some days let's sit and let's listen to the words of Jesus. And some days let's go and do likewise. Because if we don't discern the times, if we don't think about what we are choosing to give our attention to today, then we're just going to let distraction dominate us. Around 2,600 times every day, we will let distraction overrule what we know we ought to be doing. We'll burn out. We'll get cynical. We'll resent the very work that we are to be doing in Jesus. But if we start at his feet, and if we give him our first attention, our priority attention, our deepest attention, then everything else flows from that. The work that we're called to do becomes joyful. The ministry that we get to serve in becomes something that we look forward to. Our community as a body here becomes alive because we sit at the feet of Jesus and we go and we do likewise. We learned that being a disciple is both. So, what do you choose? Can you discern your days today, this time of your life, and decide what's most needful for you? What's the better part for you today? Is it sitting at the feet of Jesus? Or is it going and doing likewise? We are living in a crisis of attention. And in today's day of attention crisis, Jesus still comes into our homes and comes into our church and he comes into our heart and he still speaks these words. One thing's necessary. What is it for you today? Is it to sit at the feet of Jesus, to listen and to learn, to contemplate what we ought to be doing? Or is it to get up and go and do likewise? What will we choose? What has your attention these days? What do you find yourself paying more and more and more and more attention to these days? What is it breeding into you? What is it planting in your mind and in your heart? Do you notice that you are taking in so many things that are causing you to be anxious and worried and distracted and angry and fearful about your world? Then maybe you need to focus your attention more on Jesus. Do you find that you are taking in 2,600 times a day or so things that make you compare yourself to other folks? And so you never feel like you are good enough or that you have enough or that you can be happy in your current life. If so, then your attention is distracted and maybe you need to spend some time focused on Jesus. What voices are you allowing into your mind, into your ears that will shape your mind and shape your thinking and shape your heart and eventually shape your soul? What part of your life do you really need to be centered on listening to Christ today? Because if attention is the beginning of devotion, then what we think about and what we allow into our minds matters. Mary chose the good part. She chose the presence and the voice and the peace of Jesus. Martha had a hard time. It's not that the serving and the busyness was wrong. It's that she was distracted, divided, worried, and anxious. And so maybe for us today, maybe it is time that we stop. Take a break, sit, listen, and give him our attention again and rediscover the thing that really matters. Or maybe today, it's time that we get up and we get going. I'm not going to make the choice for you. I don't think I can, but you look at your life. You think about your days. How will you figure out what you're going to choose?